Today we shall reflect on the theme, setting us free. We know that each one of us, we are stuck with various bondages. There are certain chains in our lives which prevent us from coming close to God. And in a way, Jesus is ever willing to set us free from all these bondages. But what he requires from our part is cooperation. We need to cooperate with him. And to do this, we first have to be attentive to his word. We have to have faith and trust in him. And then we must allow him to act in our lives. And we see in today's gospel, Jesus is willing to set the man free from the demons, from the legions that he has. St. Paul tells us about the great prophets. Now these prophets had great faith, and because of their faith, they were able to do many great things. They also had to suffer for their faith. Many of them were tortured, some of them even brutally, but still they persevered because their mind, their heart was fixed on God, and nothing could move them away from that. They were even condemned for their faith, and they accepted it willingly. And similarly, we see that in our lives, we too may face a lot of persecution. We may face a lot of trials sometimes. At that time, it is important to remain firm in our faith, because these could be trying times and testing times in our lives. In the gospel, we hear how the power of evil alienates. Evil tends to take us apart from the love of God. It separates us from God and alienates us. And as we can see in the story of the man who had the legion, before he met Christ, he was in the mountains, among the tombs, bruising himself, crying out aloud. And the devil was really wreaking havoc of his life. But then he sees Jesus, and then when Jesus heals him, we see that he becomes a different person. He becomes a man in his right mind. Now Mark uses this situation to compare it to how it was during the Roman reign. For the Christians, during the time of the persecutions, things were really bad, because Christians for their faith were persecuted in various ways. And then we see in the presence of Jesus, evil disintegrates. Evil has no power on its own. It is we who sometimes allow it to take control of us. Sometimes we tend to blame the devil. The devil made me do this. Or we tend to blame persons. But my dear friends, each one of us has been given a choice. God has given us free will, and we have the power to decide what is right and what is wrong. And therefore we see when the legion asked Jesus to be sent into the pigs. Now in those times, pig was a symbol of impurity, and sea was a symbol of chaos and of death. And therefore in a way we see that all that is evil ultimately takes us away from God and brings us to death. And then we see once Jesus had healed the man, Jesus tells him to proclaim the good news. In our lives, whenever something good happens, we are always willing to share it with others, to share it with our friends, with our families, and even on social media. And in a way, Jesus too tells us to do the same thing. Whenever anything small has happened in our lives, it is then that we should proclaim his news to the world, that we should tell others and bring others closer to Jesus. And in a way, let us pray for this grace, that we too may have the faith, may have the perseverance, and above all, that we may place all our trust in the Lord.